Okay. Are we? Highness is not here yet, but he's expected. And dear excellencies, water and climate friends, here in the pavilion, as well as outside, there's a crowd outside, inspired, excited, and expecting. I have the pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the opening of the Water for Climate Pavilion here at COP28. Inspired because of all the fantastic work colleagues and friends from not only the water but also other sectors have invested in cross-sectoral collaboration to make this happen. Excited because I believe in what we are all trying to achieve in terms of change, impact, and action. Expecting, not because of pregnancy, being a father of 5, it's enough, but because I expect the decision makers at all levels are here to make strong commitments to holistic management across the whole water cycle and related investments. Grateful, I welcome great grandmother Mary Lyons and Ojibwe elder to bless the keeping of the waters. Most welcome.
Did you hear my energy? First of all, Chimi Guch in my language, that means thank you, it's an honor to be here. Bonjour, nish, nibi ikwe and desnakaz. My name is Second Water Woman. My colonial name is Mary Lyons. I sit at the center of 7 generations. I sat with my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. And now I sit with my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter. I am the link that links the 7-generation knowledge. So I say this, and what I do is I announce to the universe that we're in their space, so we ask for permission. We like to give land acknowledgement of all the people that are from this land. And we want to say thank you for allowing us to be in this space. We say Chimi Guch thank you to all the ancestors from the ones that are walking today. So from my ancestors to your ancestors, I want to read you a calling. In times past comes memory that crave a light to shine bright within our minds. In times past, a history appears. In times past, a whisper is heard through every DNA cell within our body of a blanket. In times past, a visual appears as you stare at your offsprings, as all your ancestors appear in them and all around them. My grandfather would speak of his childhood. My father would speak of his grandparents' childhoods. My grandmothers would emulate the actions of all the past childhoods. My mother would not speak of the horrors when she was ripped from her family, her ancestors. Silence would be in every step forward. The living libraries are starting to vanish. The life as we knew it is fading. The magic in our ancestors' messages are lessening. The footprints in the ground of the ancestral trails are being forgotten. The dream visits are coming less often as we find ourselves awakened during our sleeps. The winter stories, they too, are having shorter listening times. The beauty of springtime and the awakening of the new birth of our plant life relatives are coming less often. The warm summer breezes are becoming less welcoming. Our children are being birthed in wells of contamination, rather it be by choice or by deceit of the consumer. Our future leaders are following an artistry of fiction. Our guides, our parents, our grandest of all, are leaving this planet at a rapid pace through diseases that should never be. Our homelands are vanishing through toxicities and greed. Mother Earth stands with this warning. Your waters I provided for you, you're destroying. Your air that I blow in you on entrance, you are contaminating. Your warmth of my love you toss away by allowing it to burn down the home we gifted you. Your layers of me that gives you your food and the beauty you ignore by not protecting me. Now, the winds are calling you with such a strength. Now, the waters are singing out with such strength. Now, the warmth is becoming visible for you to see what will be. Now, Mother Earth is calling out for your compassion. The calling is here. It's here, my relatives, it's here. It's in you and it's all around you. Our ancestors warned the world, you can't eat money. You can't. You cannot be healthy if you choose to ignore the damaging happening all around you. Our ancestors spoke of the ancestral calling. The original agreements are being good takers and not to be dark landlords. What Creator gave each of us was a choice. Mother Earth entrusted each of us to care for her during our temporary residency, just temporary. We were birthed, we walk as a student, and we leave as a student. That's it, you can't take none of this with you. And as the higher person that you hold within you, you have to meet them, because with water, we are the vessels. Our spirit lives in this vessel that is mostly made of water. The waters in the lakes and the rivers and the pools is whole another residency. We don't pray for the water. We ask forgiveness because we're destroying what keeps us alive. You see, within these four elements, your spirit comes, bursts in the womb, the oceans and the water of our mothers. We know this water carries DNA, memory, like this computer. All our ancestors are downloaded in us. Then, on entrance, we take this air. We feel the warmth, the sun, the fire, and then we nourish and plant our feet and make residence for a very brief time on this earth. 4 elements. Everything within this planet is made up of those 4 elements. You cannot escape it. So when you start to choke and diminish and destroy water, it doesn't just affect one person, it affects our entire home. So we have to humble ourselves. You have to feel. You have to trust. Those bottles of water we drink has no life in it. There's no life in it. And yet we trust it. It holds no memory. And what we have to do is hang on to that memory. Because if we don't, all the ancestors' pathways, all their hardships through time is going to fade away. And the prophecies will unfold. And that wrath, the wrath is here. The calling is here. But we can get back to it. But we have to start with being kind. It's not one person this area or one person that area. It's about humanity because we all depend on those 4 elements. Those trees depend on it. So when you cut a tree down, you're choking air out of you. You contaminated that water. You're taking more minutes off your own life. You see, it's a calling, and the calling is here. I hope this makes sense. So when we speak about water and value, we have to look at ourselves of how we value ourselves when we walk within this time. It's brief. So I want to say, Chimi Wedge, I know from here on it's going to be beautiful, because for some odd reason, the greater being of who we say Creator is brought us all together. So I am so honored to be with you and to be with all your ancestors. So I hope you have a beautiful afternoon, but I want to say Chimiwich to this country and all the people in it. It's beautiful, and I'm happy they made me to be welcomed. So ho ho, Chimiwich.
A great thank you to great grandmother Mary Lyon for bringing us to the essence and also to the thoughts of what we are here for. So, Your Royal Highness and dear Excellencies, I'm very happy to have you one by one up here. And I just remembered, I haven't said who I am. So I'm Thomas Ribmark, I'm Director of Swedish Waterhouse at Stockholm International Water Institute. So make that clear, so we don't know that this unknown person who's standing up here. So sorry for missing that out. But I would like to start with Mr. Daler Yuma Shofakir. You are here to delivering the statement of on behalf of the President Ramon of Tajikistan. Please.
Technology. Your Excellency, President of Slovenia, Your Royal Highness Prince Jaime de Bourbon de Parme, Climate Envoy for the Netherlands, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am privileged to address the statement of the President of the Republic of Tajikistan, His Excellency Momali Rahman, at this ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, water resources and climate change are inextricably linked. The role of water in climate change mitigation and adaptation is essential. It has been well noted that the importance of the water for climate solution has been increasingly understood year by year, and since COP26 in Glasgow, it has been accepted as an important topic for the climate agenda. And that has been enhanced in the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Of course, the notion of the water pavilion has been initially aiming to increase awareness of the strong interlink between water and climate and the essential role of water in achieving climate goals. The water pavilion, therefore, continues to contribute to this process. Being an active promoter of the water agenda globally for decades, it was natural to Tajikistan to become one of the organizers of this pavilion. In this context, I would like to highlight the partnership of the Republic of Tajikistan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands with the United Arab Emirates to co-lead water walk stream of COP28. With the support of our partners, the COP28 program has included many water-related activities, which raises our hopes for further strengthening the role of water under the climate agenda. In particular, for the first time in the history of COPs, Water Action Summit will be held within the framework of this COP. It has been to be noted that the United Nations Water Conference, successfully co-hosted by Tajikistan and the Netherlands in the New York City last March, has contributed to the above-mentioned points, since it once again enhanced understanding of the vital role of water in achieving the SDGs, including climate goals. The adaptation of the new UN General Assembly resolution on the follow-up of the UN 2023 Water Conference, which calls on to develop UN system-wide strategy on water and sanitation, as well as organizing of the next two United Nations Water Conferences in 2026 and 2028 accordingly, is one more significant outcomes of the above-mentioned conference. Dear participants, as you know, the United Nations Water Conference evaluated the midterm implementation of the International Decade of Actions, Water for Sustainable Development 2018-2028. And let me share with you some of the points on the importance of this decade. Firstly, the decade has strengthened awareness of the important role of water in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Secondly, it helped to encourage new initiatives and to accelerate existing actions. Thirdly, and very importantly, it attracted attentions of the global community, including political leaders, to the water challenges. It is also important to note that this UN conference was held in half a century pace after its first conference on water back in 1977. The Water Action Agenda, which was adopted as one of the outcomes of this conference, contains more than 800 commitments, which will definitely accelerate our actions on water. The expansions of the water topic into the agenda of other processes such as health, climate, biodiversity, food, energy, and natural disaster risk reduction is an important trend in achieving other sustainable development goals. All these are the results of the implementation of the first half of the decade. I am confident that by the end of the decade in 2028, we will witness more significant achievements in the water sector. In this regard, we highlight the relevance of the ongoing Dushanbe water process by holding high-level conferences every 2 years in Dushanbe city, the capital of Tajikistan, contributing towards achieving of the goals of the named decade. The next water conference is now planned in Dushanbe in June 2024. Its program is now aligned with the program of the United Nations Water Conference and ensures the follow-up and continuity. Likewise, in 2028, at the end of the decade, the United Nations will hold a water conference in Dushanbe, which will provide an important platform for appraising achieved results of the International Decade of Actions and to highlight potential actions post the 2030 agenda. I take a moment to express my gratitude and deep appreciations to all the partners who have been significantly and continuously contributing in organizing this water pavilion and promoting the water agenda globally. As always, Tajikistan remains committed to the water agenda in particular and to the global climate agenda in general, and calls on all stakeholders to take required action, as it is now time for actions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daller, Yumash Shofakir. It was a good reminder of what we actually did in March this year and what we set as ambitions. So with that, Your Royal Highness, Prince Haim de Bourbon de Parme, I hope I said it right, but also the climate envoy for the Netherlands. Most welcome and very excited to listen to your words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a ritual. We started with a spiritual ritual, but government, opening statements are part of the ritual as well to make it formal. And I want to welcome you to this pavilion, the water pavilion in the desert. It couldn't be more symbolic as having that scarcity displayed here in this pavilion. And again, we acknowledge all the spirituality because water is spiritual. It's, I would say, also holy. In every religion, water plays an important role. Now, water is an excellent barometer of climate change. And now I'm speaking as a climate envoy again. Every day we see the examples of how climate change is throwing the water cycle out of balance. Extreme rainfall, drought, flooding, sea level rise that are jeopardizing the supplies of fresh water. 90% of climate adaptation action is water related. I repeat, 90% of adaptation is water related. Yet we often don't have adaptation, the water lens. So this pavilion is incredibly important to bring that back into play. And we have no choice but to adapt. Yet at the same time, we urgently need mitigation measures as well. Because once global warming reaches 1.5 degrees, our ability to adapt will be dramatically reduced. Mitigation requires investment in technology and climate-resilient infrastructure. We also need to restore and protect natural freshwater stocks and ecosystems. Groundwater, wetlands, floodplains are water buffers against flooding and drought. So we must ensure that protecting the quality of our water and soils guides our spatial planning and economic development. Again, having a water-related lens towards adaptation. To achieve this, we need leadership. At the UN Water Conference this year in New York, we raised our ambitions. Here in Dubai, we need to accelerate progress by putting water at the heart of climate action. To promote collective action, the Kingdom of the Netherlands was proud to co-host the UN Water Conference together with the Republic of Tajikistan. And we're grateful that the UAE leadership has brought the message of that conference from New York to Dubai. Let's work together to make water the engine of climate adaptation. We invite party delegations and non-party stakeholders to come together in this pavilion to learn more about climate and water solutions, to share experiences and ideas, and to help build a net zero, climate resilient, and water secure future for us all. Thank you very much.
I started with saying I was expecting and inspired, and thank you for that inspirational and rememberable speech. As you say, 90% of the things we have to do is related to adaptation. So with that, I would be honored to welcome Your Highness, Her Excellency, Natasha Pirc-Muzak, the President of Slovenia, and also the former EU President. No? Okay, I am misinformed. I'm sorry for that, but you're still the President of Slovenia.
Maybe predicting the future, I don't know.
Yeah. You never know what water can bring, so please. Please, welcome.
Yeah, Slovenia is not a monarchy yet. You never know. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is definitely my great pleasure to be here because water is also high on my presidency agenda. I promised to work on climate issues to the youth, and I am really, really privileged and happy to be here. So, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, I keep strong and positive memories from the UN Water Conference in March. It was a much-needed mobilizing call to scale up global water action. It is in this uplifting spirit that I'm here with you today to inaugurate this pavilion and to keep up the good work on water-related challenges. Water is central to the climate solution and must be central to any COP, if you ask me. I sincerely thank SIWI and all the pavilion partners for bringing water to the COP's heart. For my country and our people, water is not only the precious natural resources. It is also part of our history, our culture, our emotions. It is even in our constitution. And as far as I know, there are only 4 countries around the globe which have water, the right to water, as a constitutional right. We consider it an undeniable human right and an irreplaceable public good, locally and globally, if I may add. We have made it a cornerstone of our diplomacy and our international response to the triple planetary crisis. It may not come as a surprise that as a partner of this pavilion, Slovenia volunteered to co-curate the thematic day on peace, security, and health. Through our history, we have learned firsthand that water can be a conduit of peace. After the end of armed conflicts in ex-Yugoslavia, the water cooperation in the Sava River Basin was the first opportunity for the countries to work together again and to build new positive stories. In the past year, we have witnessed the devastating power of the water conflict dynamics in many parts of the world. But we have equally witnessed the peace-inductive force of water cooperation in conflict-affected areas. One of the farthest reaching and most inspiring examples is the work of EcoPeace Middle East, the organization which unites Israeli, Jordanian, and Palestinian environmentalists in the protection of not only water, but also of peace and stability. They have been the heart and soul of the preparation of this water pavilion, and it is extremely unfortunate that they cannot be here. But the reasons they have led to their absence at COP are the very reasons that make their work so critically important. Tomorrow I will participate at the leaders' event on accelerating water and climate action. I will advocate for the 3 points that are at the core of my efforts. First, water is important in both mitigation and adaptation, as you said, Your Royal Highness, as well. While its role in climate adaptation is gaining recognition, the interplay of fresh water and mitigation still does not receive sufficient attention. I wish this COP to fill this gap. Second point. We must keep the positive momentum produced at the UN Water Conference. The 3rd UN Water Conference in 2026 has been agreed upon, and the UN strategy on water is in the making. Let us match our ambition with the urgency and our response with the needs. Third point, I call again for a strong international water voice. 150 countries have made this call to the UN Secretary General, the call to appoint a UN Special Envoy for Water. I am disappointed that after more than a year, this request has yet to be heeded. Last but not least, I wish to pay a tribute to the central role of women in water action. Not only because they are disproportionately affected, but because they are a powerful drivers of both water action and peace. Slovenia is part of the multi-stakeholder coalition to accelerate gender equality in the water domain. The world needs strong partnerships to strengthen women's participation and leadership on both water and climate. We heard from the grandmother that water is life. We all know that water is life. But water was also a cause for many conflicts. It is a cause for many conflicts, and it will be a cause for many conflicts. So water can be a weapon as well. I don't want this, and I'm pretty sure you do not want this as well. So thank you. I wish you all the best.
We need action, we need commitment, and we need accountability. That's for sure. And hopefully we can gain some progress during these weeks here at COP in Dubai. So thank you, Mrs. President. Got it right this time. Sorry. And I would like to hand over now to my COP friend from COP27, Mr. Minister Hani Sevelam for the Egypt Ministry for Water and Irrigation. Please, let me hear you and us.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this. Excellency, the President of Slovenia, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have a written speech, but I just would like to express some of the efforts for somebody who is coming from one of the dry countries, if not the driest country on earth. The country that's suffering from climate change from all sides. 98% of our water is coming from the River Nile, which is coming from 10 upstream countries, with all potential climate change and extreme events of flood and droughts and potential conflict, as you mentioned, of building huge dams in the upstreams that affected the downstream, but also the sea level rise that might affect the Nile Delta to disappear. That is going to affect 8 million people in a couple of years, and all the literature or all the citations and the research is talking about the risk that Egypt is facing in terms of the Nile Delta. Also, the sandstorm and the cyclones and all these extreme events happening from the east and western desert to Egypt. So we have to work, and there must be actions, and we have to always think of water to be at the heart of climate action. That's why we started before the COP. I'm going just to summarize 4 points that happened over the last year. Before the COP27, we came together with many partners of what you see here on the wall in Cairo Water Week, under the title Water at the Heart of Climate Action, which we had a very intensive discussion and lobbying and working together to go to the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt with one common voice, that water should be at the heart of climate action. And we came up with Cairo Action, and this had a gathering of more than 16 ministers and many of the international organizations. Cairo Call for Action that was an important document to take it with us to the COP27 that was organized in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt last November, so just 1 year back. And we had the first presidential roundtable on water, first ever. We had also the special water pavilion that was attended by head of states and prime ministers, and we promoted the idea of water challenges that are related to climate change. We worked together with many partners, and we had the first ever water day at the COPs. The conclusion and the results that came out of the COP27 were very motivating for us, because we had the first time ever water was cited 5 times in the cover decision of the COP27. Adaptation was also well recognized. Launching of the AWARE initiative, which stands for Action for Water Adaptation and Resilience. And also the big achievement of loss and damage. That was one of the very important results that came out of the COP27. After the COP27, we went to the UN Water Conference again, Egypt, together with the co-chairmanship with the government of Japan, leading the Interactive Dialogue 3, Water and Climate. And we had very important messages that came out of the UN Water Conference. I'm not going to list all of them, but I advise you to go and read these messages again, because we called for global water scarcity actions, because it's very related to the climate change. And we need a climate resilient water management approach. We also need to adopt an inter-COP process, as well as a coordination mechanism for the COP results. We cannot just have results without implementation. So we need an inter-COP mechanism and also coordination mechanism for applying these results. There is also a need to mobilize funds for water adaptation and also mitigation in the water sector, in the climate sector. We take all these results to the African Climate Summit in Nairobi in September 2023. And I had the honor to lead a very important session about accelerating climate resilient water investment and call for investment in Africa to cover $30 billion of water investment gap. We had in the African leaders' declaration on climate change very important results. One of them was water is included as under the support for implementation of the Africa Water Investment Program, which aims to close the African water investment gap by mobilizing $30 billion by the year 2030. What I would like to close with is that we need to keep pushing. There is a risk that water roll back again. We have to keep pushing in this COP. We have to discuss with the negotiators. We have to keep working together on water. Otherwise, I raise the flag that there is a risk that water might roll back if we do not work together as a water community. All these organizations, and more than these organizations, are really needed to keep pushing the water to stay on the climate agenda, and it should be at the heart of climate action. Before I finish, I just want to update you on what happened with the AWARE initiative, Action for Water Adaptation and Resilience, that was one of the results of the COP27. We now have 17 countries are member of this initiative. We started mobilizing funds. The Egyptian government has already established the Pan-Africa Center for Capacity Building on Water Adaptation to Climate Change. The center is running. All of this happened in 12 months. We hosted already training for different African countries. We in Egypt, as a president of the AMCAO, or the African Ministers' Council on Water, are working together now, all the 54 countries, to develop capacity building programs on the water sector. We are here also mobilizing funding. We have some potential donors at the World Bank and the US government. We have also partners who are developing with us training and capacity building programs for African poor communities to adapt to climate change in the water sector. So this is just an overview of what happened in the last 12 months. For your information, but again, I stress on pushing again and again. Thank you for SIWI, and thanks for all the partners who organized this wonderful pavilion, and we will keep pushing to keep water at the heart of climate action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Hani Sevalam, for your wise word. I think we can gather. Oh, very happy now. The schedule is coming to an end. Very happy to have you here. And if I summarize, let's all be aware as a slogan. And with that, I'm very, very happy to also hear some final words from this year's UN COP presidency. So I'm very honored to introduce to you. Please, welcome. Yes.
Hello. Hey, sorry, last minute, but I'm here and I'm glad to be here. First of all, I'd like to start by welcoming you all here to Dubai, to COP28. It's such an honor to be here with all of you today. So, Excellencies, colleagues, it's an honor to be here today in this special moment, marking the inauguration of the Water for Climate Pavilion. The Water Pavilion and its core members have been a critical support system for the COP28 team over the last year, to design a strong and comprehensive water agenda that builds on and is not duplicative of all the wide range and existing efforts that partners have been doing for many, many years now. And for that, I would like to express our sincere gratitude. We are very fortunate this year to be coming after all the efforts that have been taking place, particularly in the last 2 years, to elevate water in the climate agenda, starting with COP26, which witnessed the start of the Water and Climate Pavilion, to COP27, where freshwater and freshwater-related ecosystems made it for the first time in the cover decision, as His Excellency highlighted. And finally, with the UN 2023 Water Conference, which took place earlier this year, rallying the world around the first UN conference on water in 46 years. A little bit overdue, but we're glad it happened. The COP28 water agenda this year is anchored through our partnership with Tajikistan and the Netherlands as the co-hosts of the conference to ensure the progress and commitments are taken forward. And on behalf of the COP28 team, we are expressing our heartfelt gratitude for the Netherlands and Tajikistan. We would not have been here without you today. This year marks a critical milestone as COP28 will see the outcome of the first global stocktake, a process against which the Paris Agreement's goals are being assessed. We know that while some progress has made it over the last 7 years, we are not doing enough collectively at the speed and scale that the climate crisis requires, and this is especially true for water. Water is a critical lever for climate action, for both adaptation and mitigation, as has been highlighted. And national commitments should recognize and prioritize climate-resilient water management as an essential climate solution, because simply put, we just cannot achieve a just climate transition without water. COP28 is committed to delivering high-impact, inclusive, and transformative outcomes this year. And in particular, we are developing a holistic programming for water on Food, Agriculture, and Water Day, happening on December 10th, as well as integrating water across the thematic programming over the 2 weeks, which starts with our leaders level moment on water tomorrow. Finally, I would like to welcome you again to COP28 and let this be our moment to collectively work together on making water a firm part of the climate agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those words. And I'm going to find my manuscript again. Thank you all, Your Excellencies, Your Royal Highness, and Your Excellencies. Thank you for sharing your insights and thoughts. Being the grandson of a man born in 1917, born in the most poor conditions in Sweden, I got a few wise words on the way, and one was never to give up. But the way my grandfather, late grandfather, expressed it to me was, and this is maybe a bit bold, but I will say it anyway. If you spit on a stone enough times, it will get wet. So that is what I think we all should bear with us. Keep on spitting. We need to fight for the water and the part of water in the climate aspect. So with that, I have a great honor to, we're a little bit ahead of, ahead of schedule. So we have a 15-minute early entering into, with warm hands, I will hand over to our next part. And maybe some of you have other things to attend, so we'll take a minute for you to exit if you would like to, and then we can fill up afterwards. So Your Excellencies, Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us to this inauguration. We have a ceremonial opening, and thank you so much. We'll continue. Thank you. See you. See you. One photo, okay. We will gather for one photo.
Make a picture of these guys.
Way better view. All photos taken? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for coming here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very good. We have some hugs to do, and soon we'll continue. Please come and refill. There are seats to be taken for everyone who is waiting outside for a seat, no longer reserved for anyone. But please come in.
I think we can start. Huh? Oh yeah, you know who I am.
Yeah, I know who you are. I know who you are. I'm expected to introduce you, so we have an official. But we can skip that.
Start.
Okay, are we ready to go? Hank, you ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready.
So with that, we're moving into the next phase of this. Please come in, join, take a seat. With warm hands, I will hand over to the next part to a very dear friend and primus motor, I would call you, of water and climate action. Please, Henk Ovink, Commissioner of Global Commission of Economics of Water. Please, the scene is yours.
Thank you so much. Great to be here in the third Water for Climate Pavilion. I remember the first, I remember the non-water pavilions that we had at COPs. And I definitely do remember the first and the second, and we'll never forget the third one. It was good to have this kickoff of the Water Pavilion by champion countries and their partners, and how they bring forward this water agenda in the context of climate. As we are all aware, water and climate are closely connected, and without one, the other falls apart, which we see happening, alas, all over the world. In that context, when the Netherlands and Tajikistan were co-hosting the UN 2023 Water Conference, the panel before shared the insights on, the Netherlands also said, after this first pillar, the Stern Review on the economics on climate, and the second pillar, the Dasgupta Review on the economics of biodiversity. It is high time to work on our third pillar, the economics on water, because this misunderstanding and misconception in that context, as well as the missing link for both climate, biodiversity, and the economy, is water. So much undervalued, misunderstood, and badly managed. Water is driving inequalities, insecurities, and unsustainability across the world. But if understood, valued, and managed in a comprehensive manner that is both inclusive at all scales, as well as sustainable on the long run, water is the driving force for that equity, for sustainability, resiliency, and therefore for climate action. And that's why I'm very happy and honored that bringing together not a Stern or a Dasgupta, all their amazing scientists and their teams, but we said we have to bring a global voice to a commission, not one voice. So the Global Commission on the Economics of Water is co-chaired by Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, President of Singapore, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, and Professors Johan Rockström, who heads the Potsdam Institute for Climate, as well as Professor Marianne Mazzucato, who heads the Institute of Public and Innovation and Partnerships in London. They four lead a commission of 20 plus esteemed panelist commissioners. I have the honor to have two here on the panel. And we're also joined by Liz Watuti, President of the Green Generation Initiative, an initiative that is creating a generation of environmentally conscious individuals by educating and empowering children and communities to love nature. I will address questions to the three that we have on stage. Johan Rockström was supposed to kick us off. We'll do without him, or we'll take him on board whenever he comes. But I'm very happy to have the two commissioners here. Daniel Etzi, he's an American environmental lawyer and policymaker, also the Hill House professor at Yale University, with appointments at Yale Law School and the Yale School of the Environment. Dan, thanks for joining. And Arunabha Ghosh, who's the founding CEO of the Council of Energy, Environment and Water in India, but also serves on the Indian government's G20 Finance Track Advisory Group, and is, of course, a member of the Global Commission on the Economics on Water. It's great that you're here, and thanks so much for joining. While we were hoping Johan would set the stage on how the global water cycle is being disrupted by man-made intervention, and how that complexity of water is actually directly linked to climate and the economy, we'll save it a bit for later, but I'm pretty sure my other panelists will talk us in that. But I'll go to Dan first for my questions. And we don't have a micro. Oh, we do have a microphone, and it doesn't work. So we do have a microphone, but it doesn't work. So we'll use this one. Yeah, you come up. It does work. Okay, fantastic. Okay.
Test.
You work closely with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala on the trade perspective too, on how labor and economy and water are closely linked. Dr. Ngozi made 5 points at the roundtable on financing water, on the water dynamics and the complexity of it, the importance of data, a new economics of water to promote efficient use of water, providing incentives to change behavior in other domains, especially agriculture and subsidies there, expanding target zones that are new economics of water must reach, and the role of the World Trade Organization. We know water is everywhere, she said, cutting across all sectors and SDGs and part of all policy domains. A water lens provides an opportunity to build solutions through a systemic and collective approach and ignite transformational change. We need incentives designed for transformation. Can you tell us a little bit more, it's my first question, on those incentives? Second, can you explain a bit how we can expand those target zones that our new economics of water must reach? And perhaps most importantly, we're here at COP, How does this new economic water paradigm help drive climate action and vice versa? Dan, floor is yours.
Hank, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and being part of a conversation, and we do want to make it a conversation, so feel free to jump in and push back or add thoughts. We're going to start with some comments, but invite you to join us. Let me say, Hank, first, thank you for organizing us, for the Commission broadly, but particularly today. It's a dream of someone like me to have the Prime Minister of the Netherlands serve as the warm-up act for my own presentation. So it's a very special opportunity in that regard. Thank you. I do want to just start by saying the story at this COP28, which I think we all know, is the global stocktake, which tells us that we are not on track where we need to go. And so the question I want to ask over the top of all the things Hank has asked me to address is what is the theory of change that moves us from a trajectory of still rising emissions to one that is tipped down and will reach net zero emissions by mid-century? And I do think, Hank, in that regard, water has an important role to play. So I'm going to start with your last question first. And that is that water is both part of the story of emissions, and it is also an impact of rising emissions. And that gives it a very unique place in the climate change conversation. And I do think another part of the story here at COP28 is that we need a much more integrated approach to problem solving. And we need to recognize the elements of the climate change challenge. And as you heard from the introduction, water remains and should be seen as one of the most critical issues in that regard. You cannot get a good solution to climate change without addressing water. And our water challenges are going to be hard to address unless we do the approach to water with an eye on climate change as well. And again, telling you all something I'm sure you know, water is likely to be one of the most serious impacts of the global warming we seem to be experiencing. And for those who haven't been tracking the last week's stories coming out about this, and Johan may add to it, but it's quite likely this year will be the hottest year on ever. It is certain that the month of July was the hottest month on this planet since we could record temperatures. There is important work being done, led by Johan Rockström and others, about planetary boundaries. And the most recent report to come out suggests that we are at risk of transgressing 6 of 9 of those planetary boundaries, tracking critical Earth systems. So I do think the stage is set for some critical and important conversations here, and I am grateful to be part of the one about water. So let's dig into the specifics that Hank wanted us to get to. One is around incentives. And I think if you're asking what is the theory of change, you've got to ask a question about what's going to motivate people. And that is, from a point of view, an incentives question. Who is going to change behavior, and why are they going to change? What do we have to do to get them to change? And I think the lessons of the Stern review on the economics of climate change, the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity, both suggest that we do need to have a grip on core economic concepts, frameworks, and tools. And if Dr. Ngozi were here, she would tell you what she has just told one of the other discussions of the day across the way on the broader issue of climate change, and that is we need price signals. We need to encourage people to be careful about the use of water. And she would tell you one more thing, that if we don't pay attention to that, we're really at risk of under-delivering on the equity considerations around water. Because when we don't pay attention to that cost and effect, the price is paid most severely by those at the lowest income levels. So I think there is a real need to pay attention to those basic economic tools that get people to pay attention, encourage careful use of water, and support a system that makes sure that those in a position to conserve do so, creating space in the water system for those who are underserved in the current moment. You also mentioned, Hank, the question of the trade system. And I think Dr. Ngozi would be the first to tell you that there are important issues where trade comes together with water, with climate change as a third piece of a critical mix. And in that regard, one of the real challenges, and again, I'm telling you all things that I'm sure you know, a very significant percent of water use is in agriculture, somewhere between 80 and 90%. And there's an arena that especially needs incentives, needs a changed water management framework. And part of this could be the trade system providing an impetus for change. if we began to say that where people are subsidizing water use, and that is a problem in many countries, the trade system is going to take away the benefit of that government subsidy with a structure called a countervailing duty, which basically says when you subsidize a product and it goes into international trade, when it enters a market and it's cheap because it was subsidized, we're going to actually impose a special tariff. And that undoes whatever economic advantage there was to the distortion of cheap water that should have been perhaps kept at home rather than creating a product that's now moving in international markets. So I do think there's a role for the trade system to help create some discipline, support the push towards a more careful management structure for water, support the incentives that are being created, the new policy dynamics. And I think the bottom line is that we are looking to land this commission out over the course of the next year on a transformed framework of water management. And frankly, of a new approach that drives real change as opposed to talk. And that is, let me close where I started. That is the key message here at COP28. What is your theory of change? How are we going to get people to change? And we want to ask that same question about water. Who needs to change? How do we get them to change? What are the policy levers to push them to change? And we do think in this commission that the opportunity to create a new economics of water that engages a broader set of communities, a more inclusive framework than perhaps has been used in the past, but building on the well-known and well-understood economic logic, tools, frameworks, and concepts, especially incentives for care, is a part of the path forward. So with that, I hand you back the microphone.
Thank you so much, Dan. Well explained. I look at the audience. Think about these questions that come in. If Dan starts to talk about how we have to change the system that is incentivizing bad water management, undervaluation, and the abuse of this very scarce resource, and how that systems change is going to help us understand, because of that understanding, better value water across the board. And of course, we're here in the food pavilion talking about agriculture and water is key. I hope it spills over. And Johan, please join. Johan Rockström, thanks so much. Thanks for joining. We started early, and you're joined by a panel with your two co-commissioners, Dan and Arunabha, but also with Liz Watuti. She is not only representing the youth voice in the panel, but chairs and started an organization on this generation a leading voice in the climate and environmental debate. As well as that, Liz, you sit on the Nairobi River Commission in Kenya as its youngest member, but you are so close to nature and water that we want to hear both perspectives of you. But before I go to Johan, because you just arrived, we give you time to sit. Let me go to Arunabha first. Dan talked about how we're going to change the economic system and incentivizing bad water use and management, and be able to provide and provoke a better valuation of that very scarce resource. Arunabha, you just wrote an opinion piece some weeks ago, and you said, we're in a better space now and place now than we were years ago. Water is higher up the agenda. We see it coming back. We had the second ever UN Water Conference. The attention now has to go to action. That's one of your lines there. The Global Commission is advocating for a systemic change in the way the world values and manages water. In the context of this report, to act in the meantime, like you were saying, I quote you, particularly in regard to the three crucial pillars of water security being proper valuing and pricing of water, water recycling, and the role of finance, as you alluded to. Can you expand on that argument in the context of where we are today, COP28 and climate? And second, or first, up to you, you were key and critical for the water agenda in the G20 chairmanship of India. How those two relate, knowing that this is again a forum where the world comes together to propel change, transformation, how your voice in there and giving a voice to water mattered, and how important it is here for the climate debate. Arunabha.
Thank you, Henk, and good afternoon to everyone here, and good day to everyone watching this online. It's a real privilege to be here in the Water Pavilion. I remember, Henk, when there was no Water Pavilion at COPs.
me too.
And I was also there when we got the first pavilion going, so it's really exciting to be back here. I think the way I see this is really a four-part relay race, of which we are somewhat into the third leg right now. The first part of this relay race was earlier this year in March, when the global UN Conference on Water happened for the first time in 46 years, at which time the Global Commission on the Economics of Water also brought out its first report. That call to action, embedded in science, led by Johan Rockström, calling for us to put water front and center of our agenda, not because it's a separate silo, but because it flows through, pun intended, all the other issues that we're trying to tackle. But then the baton of the relay race was passed on 6 months onwards to India's G20 summit, the Leaders Summit. But throughout this year, during India's G20 presidency, we were trying to make sure that issues of water were also part of a very deliberate focus on the broader sustainable development agenda. In order to understand this, it's important to understand how the world's largest economies, which comprise the G20, have addressed this issue of water in the past. Often what happened was it would, as we are seeing this even now, because agriculture takes up a lot of the water, so water would get discussed only in agricultural conversations or only in environmental conversations. And then under the Saudi Arabian presidency, there was a first focus on a minister's communique on sustainable and resilient water management. And then under the Italian presidency, there was a sort of a digital instrument created as a G20 water platform. But under India's G20 presidency, what we did was the Ministry of Jal Shakti, or technically it means the Ministry of Powerful Water, became directly engaged in driving the issue of water and water efficiency in the discussions. And the four areas were identified: universalization of water and sanitation services, just like SDG 7, SDG 6 is also heavily off track in terms of the millions of people, hundreds of millions of people that need access to that very basic lifeline. Secondly, around participatory management of groundwater, especially when it is mistreated as an invisible and underpriced resource. So how can we involve communities in that participatory groundwater management? Third, in the context of climate change, how do we build water infrastructure which is more climate resilient in order to make both the water and the climate dimensions much more intersecting in dealing with rising climate risks? And fourth, to deal with water use efficiency, including driving a circular economy of water. Now this then brings us to the third leg of this race, which is COP28. So how does the signal coming out of the UN in March, the signals coming out from the leaders in the G20 in September, what does that mean for embedding water into the COP process? And this is where the points that the Commission has brought out become particularly important. We've got to start by pricing the resource correctly, including valuing the non-economic uses of water, the cultural uses, the environmental dimension, etc. But pricing does not mean at the cost of ignoring the vulnerable, and therefore the pricing has to go alongside the appropriate support and targeted support for the vulnerable. It is because of the absence of that that the underpricing of water actually results in the highest prices being paid by the poor. The second thing which COP28 could be really pushing hard on is in driving forward the circular economy of water. Right? Some analysis that my colleagues did for the G20 showed that if the treated water in India were reused for horticulture purposes, that itself would create additional value of $12 billion. And that's just now, and it's not that we are able to treat all of the water right now. So the value of this becomes that much more when every single drop is used and reused many more times. The final bit is therefore going to be about finance. And the Global Commission on the Economics of Water said, in addition to this new economics of water, we need a new financial architecture that can support these moves. And this is where the conversation that is happening around the reform of multilateral development banks, the focus on de-risking facilities, risk-sharing facilities, is absolutely critical to drive this action on water. Just less than an hour ago, Prime Minister Modi, on the opening plenary, announced from India's side something called the Green Credit Initiative. You'll hear more about this later in the day. But just last month, India domestically has launched a green credit scheme. And this is not about carbon, it is about forests and water. So how do we create new mechanisms so that we're able to bring together companies, communities, countries, in forming more effective mechanisms to drive investment into the areas that we need? So there is a theory of change, as Dan outlined, but there is also this relay race, and we are now into the third leg. As you know, the fourth leg is always the fastest leg. The question is, who amongst us takes that baton and runs?
Thank you. Thanks, Arunabha. And thanks also for explaining the sequence on how political momentum is not only built, captured, but now has to be driven forward. And explaining a bit what pricing really means. It's not putting a price on water, it's really looking at the whole value chain of everything in that context of that so valuable resource. Johan, thanks for coming. We first envisioned you coming in, setting the stage on how the water crisis really works and how it's impacting each and every one of us across the world, and how that impact is also interrelated. Your institute and you have been working on planetary boundaries and showcasing that they are breached, but also how they interact. And I think the interaction might be the lens in where water plays a key role, also in the mix with climate change. So perhaps, and I have two questions. First, you can explain us a bit how far we are off track, how this water crisis is both local and global, and how these dimensions of crossing planetary boundaries are linked through water. And you said something interesting in the context of climate is that if we have a healthy biodiversity, if these boundaries are not breached, healthy marine system, low pollution, healthy soils, good hydrology, more likely to have a stable climate. One, that led you to the conclusion saying we need to use the climate agenda as a trampoline for actions across the planetary boundaries. What does that trampoline mean for water in the context of climate? Here we are. And what does it mean for the economy? So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Henk, and great to be here, and sorry for coming a bit late. So first on the crisis. Well, for the first time, we are today scientifically forced to conclude that we are pushing the whole water cycle out of balance. We've never had to address that before. I mean, we've been spending years and years focusing on water scarcity, extreme water events, how to have watershed management, river basin management, integrated water resource management, transboundary resource management. All of this is still central and of high priority. But now for the first time, unfortunately, we must recognize that we're changing the functioning of the entire hydrological cycle at the planetary scale. Every 1 degree Celsius of warming adds another 7% of moisture to the atmosphere. We're powering up the whole hydrological cycle. It might sound good to get more fresh water. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have ample evidence that it leads just to more fierce events. So when we talk about flooding, droughts, dry spells, extreme events, that's exactly what we expect when you have an overpowered hydrological cycle. So that's where we are, and that's what we're experiencing right now. And this has immediate impacts, as we know, on human well-being, socioeconomic development. It's fundamentally about, as Arnav points out, putting water, the right value on water, to give us the incentive to build resilience, because water is, I would argue, the #1 victim of climate change. But we are victimizing this in a double fashion, because the hydrological cycle is impacted not only by the warming of the planet, but also by us degrading ecosystems. Because we know that in many parts of the planet, up to 40% of rainfall is actually generated from healthy ecosystems themselves. So if you have a healthy canopy in a rainforest, it self-generates rainfall just from the fact that it's operating the whole evaporative moisture feedback. So we are really in a fix here in terms of having to come back within a safe operating space on planetary boundaries. So that's your point, Henk, about the crisis. When it comes to the question about how this links to Dubai, COP28 and the healthy biosphere, it's also that we can today show that water is actually fundamental for the mitigation pathway to hold the 1.5 degrees Celsius window alive. And what do we mean by that? Well, we know we have to phase out fossil fuels. That's topic number one here at COP28. But we equally know that we must transition the food system from source to sink of carbon, and we must keep the carbon sinks intact in all the natural ecosystems. Well, we're talking about in the order of 5 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year to be absorbed by natural ecosystems to be able to fulfill that requirement. 5 per year. Today we're emitting roughly 5. So we're transitioning from emitting 5 to sequestering 5. Well, we talk about that always in terms of carbon. But in fact, behind the carbon, there's water. If you don't have water, you don't have plants. You don't have trees. So you don't have carbon sequestration ecosystems. We don't have the numbers there, but our back of the envelope estimates is that nothing less than somewhere around 5,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water per year will be needed in addition to be able to keep that whole carbon sequestration capacity in the biosphere alive. 5,000, dear friends, is twice as much as global irrigation today. Twice as much as global irrigation. So we're talking big numbers. This has still to be verified fully in our work in the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, but you can just imagine the economic value of that investment. That is a way of building the resilience of our Earth system and therefore also our societies to be able to cope with the changes that we're facing. So that is what I would argue, Henk, is really about the health of the biosphere. And we're working very hard to try and connect the climate, the carbon, the water, and the economics. And I think that we'll be able to provide some really useful results there from the Commission as we come up with our results during the course of next year.
Thanks, Johan. This does not resonate yet here in the COP discussion. Arunabha says water is more or less building up attention and getting traction, you could say, becoming the opportunity for that climate action in the best way possible. You give not only an argument for the health of our planet and our own well-being and our economies, you also give a clearly financial economic argument on how that could work. How are we going to ensure that water argumentation in the context of the climate negotiations, but also towards the solutions, are going to happen? How optimistic are you in the fastness of that?
Well, the speed, I think there's reason to be pessimistic, but I think we're doing some progress in terms of placing water at the center of the climate discussions. I mean, when you think of it, in most discussions on the energy transition, we are quite good today at looking at the drivers of change, at really what are the sources behind our failure to phase out fossil fuels. Everything from inequity, consumption patterns, to economic growth. We have to do the same thing on water, and I think we're increasingly good at doing that, to look at, what is it that determines our ability to keep the carbon intact in the biosphere? Well, it's behind that you have fresh water. And I think that is coming up rapidly, but the key is, in my mind at least, to quantify, assess, and connecting it to the economics, to really get the policies, the hard policies require us to be able to monitor, account for the water. It's kind of water budgets right through from start to end. But let me just close us by saying that, to your point, I think water has done much more progress in the climate negotiations on the adaptation agenda, rightly, because it hits hardest in terms of droughts, floods, heat waves, food insecurity. We need to bring it now into the mitigation space. And that is, I think, where the economics comes perhaps in most closely.
And as a huge opportunity. 'Cause
Absolutely.
it's been perceived thus far in the mitigation space as something that shies us away from the central discussion there. But it is the central discussion. Centralizing water in the mitigation discussion is key. And perhaps to all your points thus far, the way water links with countries beyond their borders, that it is as well local as it is regional and global, makes that no country can do this alone. So this is exactly the space where we have to deal with this.
No, just to not to take more space, but just to say that, I mean, we have, perhaps that has been mentioned already, we have so much evidence as well that, building that water resilience, which is a mitigation outcome, gives multiple benefits.
Yeah.
A farmer with more organic matter in the soil, better soil water holding capacity, gives a higher yield and also better drought management capacity. So you have win-win outcomes of building that water-related carbon agenda.
Thanks. Before we give you all more the floor, I want to go to Liz. You've been a youth champion in the context of climate. When I listen to you and read your stories, your passion and conviction and commitment to nature is all over the place. It's radiating from every word you transcend. Water is key to nature. You sit on this river commission. You know what it does. You heard now 3 men talk about the importance of water in the relationship to climate, to health, our agriculture, our security at large, and to our economy. What would be your perhaps provocation or call to this Global Commission on the economics of water, and how can we partner in making sure that that goal is met?
Thank you for having me. I want to begin with the interconnectedness of the issues that we are speaking about here today. For a long time, especially in the global conversations, you find that nature and climate are treated as though they were separate. But if we look up the issues that we are facing today in the world, for sure these are 2 sides of the same coin. And we have to really address them as one. And I've seen this especially in the work that I do back at home, and also with the conversations that we are having even in these forums. And we have to begin looking at the earth as a whole. And looking at the earth as a whole is the understanding that humanity's survival is very much dependent on how we are treating our ecosystems, on how we are treating nature, on how we are restoring our water sources and our ecosystems. Because for sure, if we are not able to bring that connection, then it means that we will not be able to address the challenges that we are trying to solve. If we do not address the nature crisis, then it means we cannot be able to meet our climate targets as well. And just to give a very good context example, the biggest problem right now, for instance, even in the nature issues, we talk about water, right? And water, for instance, if we talk about water, there are challenges that people are facing, especially the frontline communities on the ground. Issues of the drought, issues of floodings. These are challenges that we can be able to overcome if we understand the linkages and the interconnectedness of the issues that we face here today. The issue of pollution is the other thing as well. And sitting at the Nairobi Rivers Commission, for instance, this is a commission that is trying to bring about the restoration of the largest river basin in Nairobi. And the approach that the commission has decided to take is the approach of the basin-wide approach to make sure that pollution is being addressed from the source all the way downstream. And if we look at such a solution that enables the communities, especially the communities that are along that basin, to also participate in the restoration, then this is an approach that we can be able to use to make sure that we address the issue of the water crisis at the same time. During this COP, we have the issues of, the commitments and the pledges that are being made. And we have been here before, where pledges are made, commitments are made, and at the end of the day, we leave the COPs with the same slow speed when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. I think for me, the biggest role that we have, even with this, the Global Commission, is to ensure that we bring about that interconnectedness and also ensure that the diverse voices that are present in the halls of this COP are very much represented, and that the solutions that are being brought to the table are part and parcel of the conversations. And also multilateral support is going to be very key for us to address the challenges of the water crisis, the challenges of the nature crisis, and the challenges of the climate crisis, which are very much interconnected. And the other thing, we need to understand the role that all these diverse voices bring to the table. For instance, young people are the ones that are driving all the solutions on the ground right now. And we see the innovations, we see the ideas and the creativity that has been brought on the ground by the young people. But this creativity, these innovations and ideas will not go to scale if we do not support them, if we do not make sure that their voices are present in the decisions that are being made in these halls. And if we do not also make sure that they have the resources, the tools, and the finances that they need to make sure that their solutions are upscaled up to the next level. And I have seen the challenge of water as well coming out really strongly, even in the projects that we run back at home. And I'll give a very good example of the work that we do with the Green Generation Initiative. Every day we are helping children grow their own green spaces within their own school compounds. Every day we are helping the same children grow their own food within their own school compounds. And we're helping them understand that the climate crisis is a challenge that they can address even as children, that it's a challenge that they can address and use their voices to make sure that everybody is part and parcel of the solution. And when we are growing these trees with the children in the schools, we realize that water definitely is a very big component of the success of the projects that we run, because these children have to adopt and plant a tree each within their own school compound. And these trees are trees that will nourish their bodies, because the fruit trees are going to produce fruits that will supplement their school feeding programs. But at the same time, if we do not address the climate crisis, it means that these trees and the life-bearing fruits that they bear will also not survive on a 2.7 degrees warmer planet. So we have to make sure that we bring these local solutions, these grassroots stories to the global conversations, and make sure that that interconnectedness is coming out strongly, and at the same time that we do not treat these issues as though they were separate, because they are one.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Very good. Yeah. Two things. I want some reflections from the panel, but I also look at the room and see if there's opportunity to ask questions. And I also see another commissioner of the Global Commission, Maria Fernanda Espinosa. You're welcome to come up front and join the conversation if you want. There's
a seat waiting.
I will remain silent, but I will
No.
next to our
Yeah. Well, perhaps we can ask you to give a first reflection, Maria Fernanda. No? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Who? Looking at the audience. Yeah. There's only one mic. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. If you can also tell us who you are.
Obvious, I have to. Okay, thank you so much. My name is Duncan Muhereza. I come from Uganda. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so my reflection comes from what the last panelist has said. And my concern is about the young people. Where I come from, when you talk about water access, it is a crisis that has widened gender equality, because it greatly affects young people and the women, because these are the people that need to access these water sources. So when climate crisis sets in, we have found these mothers walking longer distances, and these are the people that sometimes need even extra health management, especially when they are maybe breastfeeding, carrying pregnancies, and when they're in their menstruals. Then when you talk about now the young people, in African setting, and my colleagues here can testify, we have seen families where young people are required to carry water in the morning for the parents before they go to school. And when such a crisis that affects water comes in, it now affects their education access. And this happens in our communities where I come from. So my question is that, how do we ensure that these who are most affected are also involved in finding solutions, and to make sure that these are solutions that does not take us back into maladaptation? But also, how do we close this gap to ensure that these women and young people who are greatly affected can also realize their right, because gender equality is also a human right. So my concern is, how do we bridge this gap, and how do we bring these who are most affected to also participate in finding solutions? Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. That's clear. Eh? Water, and exacerbated by climate, is also driving inequalities. That is a societal as well as an economic question. And how can the Commission also address this aspect? And leading to action, and second, making sure that those voices are part of the discussion, as Liz also said, helping drive those solutions. Other questions before I hand it to the panel to respond? Yes, please, come forward and introduce yourself. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My name is Ahan Habib. I'm from Iraq. I want to share an example with you, then I will ask my question. This is the problem of water in Iraq. It's really, devastated. My country is devastated because of this problem, because the two main rivers of Iraq, Tigris and Euphrates, are about to drought, and this caused a lot of problems. For example, people from the south, moved to north of Iraq, and there are a lot of problems because of this, this kind of moving. And we also have a really oil-rich city, Basra, in the south of Iraq, but because of the quality of the water, people get sick. There are a lot of side effects of this. The rate of cancer is rising in the city. So this causes really problems, this water. My question is, do you guys in your initiative consider Iraq as a part of your projects? Do you have something for Iraq, a solution, a guideline or something?
Thank you, that's very clear. And let's see if we can get to that. Other questions before I hand it to the panel? Yes, please. It's the last, and then we'll do the round.
It's not maybe a question, but I just want to mention it.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jacob Ossara. I'm the founder of a scale-up in decentralized drinking water supply. And we work mainly with governments worldwide. So I'm around 6 years old, but we already work with several governments. And what we actually do, where I see a great benefit, is that we really combine the industrial capacity with governmental network, basically. And that's what we try to do, is to combine the needs and the resources together to set up projects to provide clean and safe drinking water anywhere where it's possible. And that really worked for us, because we also have backing from our own government, because I'm from Belgium, and the Belgian government really supports that. And it gives us access to the political level in the countries that we're active. And with that political level, we get the support to start up a project, and then we go to the local communities. We set up a bond with them, and then we set up a project to provide drinking water. We really involve them. So when we work with a government, for example, the first 3 years, they are obligatory to work with us. So they cannot buy the system, and then we're off. And the reason why we do this is that we have technology transfer within these 3 years. So when we move out, if we move out, we don't want that, but if you move out, that at least the people on the ground know how to operate the system and how to deal with it, also for maintenance and stuff. And that's for us really something that really helps us. And it's also maybe a call where government and industry works together. And now what we're doing right now, for example, Suriname is our most important market. We already provide 20% of the interior with drinking water, and now we're setting up a PPP, public-private partnership, and that really helps for us. So it's part, I think, of a solution, and I would want to know what your thoughts are on these public-private partnerships on accelerating access to clean and safe drinking water. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the other part you mentioned is the capacity building. That is so key. So both how can public and private partners help scale and speed up the transformation needed, and second, how the importance for ensuring that there's capacity across. Okay, I look at the panel, and Maria Fernanda, we have you now too. So who wants to go first? We can go in the order. Yeah, that's fine. Johan?
Yeah, thanks. Really good remarks, and I won't go in too much in detail on them. I just like to emphasize that I kind of just want to come back to the fact that what we are adding to the whole drinking water, sanitation, gender equity dimension on the ground with regards to access to safe water and technologies for that is that for the first time we're changing even the source of fresh water, which we very rarely address, that now rainfall is shifting. So we cannot even trust the input. Even if we do everything right on the ground, we cannot even trust the input. And this requires much more work in river basins such as in Iraq and Euphrates and Tigris to really bring down the latest assessments on the ground, because it shifts fundamentally the economics, but also the politics of water to be able to have a fair distribution and building the resilience to be able to shift that risk into a manageable level. Is that possible? It requires that we move fully on climate and on water simultaneously. And I think that is what we need to make clear at the COP meeting here in Dubai. But I'm actually absolutely in support of bringing up particularly the women and children agenda. They are the first victims, undoubtedly, of all quality and quantity related water extremes. And that is an unacceptable outcome, which is also economically a very big cost for society.
Yeah. Thanks, Johan. Liz?
Yeah, I must say the strongest resilience to the climate crisis has mostly been demonstrated by the people that are most affected by the same crisis. And picking up from the first question, even the women that have to walk for long distances to search for water and food for their families, this is a show of resilience. The fact that they are able to go out there, find solutions, go out there and make sure that they are supporting their families in different ways. And in the same way, these are the same women trying to get even hand-dug wells to get water for their families. I think for me, this is a very strong show of resilience that indicates that we must tap into the locally available solutions. And these locally available solutions are the same ones that we also need to continue making sure that we ramp up the financing for the same and make sure that even in terms of the policies, we have more stronger policies that ensure that their representation and the challenges that are affecting these communities are addressed. And the other thing is we have to also make sure that when we talk about resilience, we are looking more into how we can be able to support the solutions that these people that are affected bring to the table. And I have seen a lot of young people, for example, across the African continent that are advocating and leading on-ground solutions that ensure access to water for people. And when we talk about access to water as well, we need to ask ourselves, how much further are we willing to stretch in terms of the stronger policies within this space? How much stronger are we willing to stretch in terms of investing in nature, investing in these solutions that they are bringing to the table? And how much further are we willing to stretch in terms of making sure that their voices are also included in these conversations and also within even the global economics conversations? And I think for me, that is how we will make sure that we are not only bringing them to the table, but they are actually well represented and they are also well supported to continue advocating for what they're doing and to also continue upscaling the initiatives and the solutions that they're providing on the ground.
Thanks, Liz. This is a very clear call to action and to ensure that it's happening, because that is not a tick the box on inclusion, and it's also hard work. Inclusion is not a noun but a verb. You have to work on it every day, and to make that work, you have to do much more than just only send out an invite. And that support structure that is needed is key. We saw it with the UN Water Conference. Setting up a hotline for the youth and having a fund available was the only way to bring in a larger crowd of young people to New York. Otherwise, it would never have been possible. So thanks for that call. Dan.
So I was impressed by the speakers and the questions and the comments that were put forward about one of the other things this commission has had to take seriously and I think is still working through. And that is the reality that in some regards, water is common to everyone, and yet it is also different depending on geographies. So when I think about the circumstances of Iraq, I think we have to be quite different than the circumstances of my home part of the United States, the Northeast, which is a very wet state of Connecticut. So there are significant circumstantial differences that have to be taken into account, and yet we seek some best practices. We seek to provide a governance framework that will at least provide a starting point for good water management in all circumstances across the world. And yet, and this is something Johan's taught us, the science is coming even more clear. We also know that our presumption that water is a local resource entirely is not true. It's got regional and perhaps even broader than regional dimensions that have to be factored in. So we've got a challenge, and that does make the water issue or issues a significant one from a policy point of view, because there will not be a single answer. There will be multiple answers across different circumstances, and yet we do hope to have some core framework, some principles, some starting points that will be of value to governments at the national scale across many countries, but also regional and local scale water managers and the communities that are managing these resources. So in the end, some of what we will have is more process to ensure you get to the right answers appropriate to your own space. And I think one of the principles that certainly Dr. Ngozi, as one of the co-chairs, emphasizes every time is the need for a people-centered approach to water. And in that regard, it's got to be people-centered with a recognition of that diversity of communities that we'd be talking about.
Thanks, Dan. A people-centered approach to water means a people-centered approach of the Commission. And I think this is where you and Liz can shake hands, or Dr. Ngozi and Liz too. Arunaba.
I had two responses. One to that last question that came up about PPPs. I don't have a direct answer to that specific question, but having looked at water-related PPPs across the world quite a bit, I think it boils down to making sure that equity and financial sustainability are not treated as an either or. And that has often been the reason why a lot of PPPs have failed, where you think you can bring the private sector to then put in the investment, etc. So you're driving investment, making sure it's financially viable, but then you forget the people, right? And then when you insist that the private sector delivers the resources to the people as well, then these issues come up about equity, about what is the pricing, etc. that happens. I think often this ends up becoming a false binary that drives a lot of the political economy around water. And in order to solve for that, there is a difference between value, price, and what you actually pay, right? Valuing water and bringing the price closer and closer to the true value of water is what the Commission is asking for, right? What you actually pay out depends on the circumstances that Dan was referring to and how you pay out. Do you pay out upfront and then get the subsidy into your bank account, or do you pay out less because the government is giving the viability gap funding to the private entity? Those models might vary, but I think it's very important not to distinguish between that there is an economic price of water and there is an environmental value of water, and the two are separate, and then we can forget about it. This has to be at the core of how we start redesigning PPPs across the world. The other thought I had, Duncan, thank you so much for your question about and comment about the gender equity dimension. 18 years ago in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, I walked down with schoolgirls down a hill to collect water and try and see what it would mean to climb up a mountain with a 20-liter bucket of water. And this is what these schoolgirls are having to do every single day, right? And so it is, and then you extend the length you're walking, you're missing classes, in addition to all the health-related dimensions that come up. Now, this goes back to Liz's point about the role of the youth. I think the change that we would like to see, and elements of which we are now witnessing, is that the youth are no longer just an object of our concern. They've become the subjects or the agents of the change itself that we're trying to see, and in building that resilience. Just 2 weeks ago, my organization, CEW, we had released several documentaries last year around what we call the faces of climate resilience. And just 2 weeks ago, this documentary series, it's available for free on YouTube, won an award in Italy. And one of those films, please go and watch, is about the young water scientists in a Himalayan state in northern India, and how these young people who were at the receiving end of the challenge when they were children are now taking on the role of becoming water scientists, measuring the spring water, digging new recharge wells, etc., and basically becoming completely different agent of change. Might seem like one anecdote, but then we've tried to capture lessons from all the G20 countries in a compendium that was officially released by the leaders a few months ago. So the point I'm trying to make here is, whether it's water, whether it's climate, whether it's nature, we've got to all bring it together. The G20 called it the Green Development Pact. It's a covenant that brings nature and nature-based solutions into our climate conversation and embeds climate into our nature-based conversations. And that is where the role of the youth as agents of that new change becomes important, even as we invent and exercise a new economics and financing strategy around water.
Thank you so much, Arunabha, and inspirational to hear. Maria Fernanda, you just joined the panel. You're not only commissioner to the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, you're board chair of the Women in Global Health, you're former president of the General Assembly, former minister of Foreign Affairs from Ecuador. Tell us, you heard the panel and the questions, and you also know where we're heading for, and we are here at COP.
Well, thank you,
give us our
Henk.
reflections.
It really shows that I wasn't supposed to be speaking. I wanted to join the commissioners here, but I'm very happy to say that I heard the panelists, I heard the very smart and to-the-point questions, and basically 3 ideas that is sort of a little bit of a summary of what I heard. 3 keywords. The first word is complexity, and I think that the way nature works is not in silos, is not team-specific. Water here and the atmosphere here and land and biodiversity here and oceans there. And I think the challenge is how to design governance models that really take care of this complexity and the interconnectedness. I think Arunabha mentioned that, and that is something that we have been looking carefully into the Commission's work. We have been informed and inspired by the science and by the Johan's team science and the Potsdam team. It is very clear that when we speak about the water crisis, we are speaking about the planetary crisis and us trespassing planetary boundaries. 6 of them, I think, Johan, basically, this information has to tell us something, that we need better governance designs that are multi-scale and designed for the very local, adapted, but also a global governance designs that looks at the commons. I'm sure that we mentioned the idea or the call of the Commission of looking at the water cycle as a common good. And this is easy to say, but difficult to do in terms of the governance, the policy, and the decisions that have to be taken at the highest level. So dealing with complexity, looking at the water crisis in a systemic way, it's words that everybody says, but again, they require different frameworks for investment, different frameworks for governance. The number 2 keyword is about valuation. Valuation is not always pricing, it's not the chromatistic value of water. It's valuing water in its own right, as a human right, as an environmental service, and in valuing water, for example, in a tracker mode to look at supply chains and in water markers, to look at value chains and water markers. This is also extremely important in terms of investment, but also in terms of the prevention and in terms of the precautionary principle decisions that need to be made at certain points. And the number 3 is about equality and about human security. I just came from a Munich Security Conference event, and the truth is that more and more we see that climate-related conflicts are very much associated with water stress. And when we see that 15 nations that are the hardest hit by water stress, 8 of them have peacekeeping or political missions, UN political missions, it tells us something. It tells that water stress, conflict, and human security are also intertwined, and this is also an aspect to factor in the work, in the future work of the Commission. So thank you again. I'm very happy that for the first time ever, water is part of the agenda in its own right. It's called the Water Day or something like Water and Food Systems Day. This is good news for the water sector. And I think that we would like to see also a decision and the global stocktake have the word water in it. It's not too much to ask. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hand of applause. Thank you, dear panel, for being with us. Thank you all for not only joining this, but also asking your questions. Look up again the valuing water principles, because I've been listening again more carefully to what you've been saying, and those 5 principles touch upon exactly that, including all and empowering all, ensuring that there's capacitation, valuing water across the board, environmental, economic, social, spiritual, at all levels and scales. Invest, but also innovate. Try to dare to look for that new, but at the same time, with everything that we do, ensure that we build trust and bring in the now and the next generation at the table to be able to make the decisions for the future that really matter. Thank you all. Wishing you a good COP. Wow. I think this is the end. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The signal.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Ja, det är hela eftermiddagen. Jag har en personlig sak som jag tycker jag har gått och tänkt på. Jag träffade... Men då sa hon till mig, thank you for coming here. I hope to see you again in this context.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I remember. Why you. I know your face, but thank you. But thank you, sending me WhatsApp last minute. And I was at the security conference. So I wanted to finish and go. But it's like 5 minutes of inauguration. So I said, so glasses of water. Great, I'm very happy. Congrats for the thank you for coming. Let's do your WhatsApp. Good luck,
Sådär i efterhand. Tack. Okay. Sorry for the break. We are ready to move on to the next phase. Still in transition to some ways. So thank you for joining. I'll call you up. Yeah. Take your seat. Yeah.